Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today we're going to be working with a newer set from Concord 9th. This is called You Are Here. I was seeing it everywhere on Instagram, this beautiful floral heart stamp, and I was like, I have to snatch this thing up. I love it. It is a very large stamp, so just a heads up on that. It definitely can complete a whole card. So I'm going to be stamping this heart. That was some Eclipse masking paper that I put down so that I could just stamp it one time to go ahead and get my mask. Because of course we're doing a one layer card. Do I know how to make anything else? The answer is yes, but it's very rare. So I went ahead and stamped that, and then I'm going to stamp it again, this time on my actual card base. And I'm using Intense Black ink from Simon Says Stamp because, of course, we're going to be doing some Copic coloring. Again, I do know how to do other things, but, you know, I just don't. So I went ahead and fussy cut out that mask. I'm going to go ahead and put that down to protect the heart. And then I wanted there to be a border around this card, but I didn't have any post-it tape that was the right size. So I cut some copy paper to a 1/2 inch, and then I'm just using Tombow Mono multi-glue to make it a mask, basically. This is when I first started, and I was... I'm still cheap. I'm still doing it. What am I even talking about? When I first started, I'm still doing this. Clearly. I also use Eclipse masking paper and Post-its and different things now, but this was like my go-to way to make a mask. And when I need it, when the other things don't work, it still is. So it has to be Tombow Mono multi-glue though, because it's repositionable after it dries. When you put it down wet, permanent. When you put it down after it dries, it's repositionable. So I went ahead and masked off my border, and then I'm working my Ranger craft mat, and I'm going to do some Distress ink. You will notice that there's a large circle in the middle of my stamp pad that was not there before. So I don't have like set ink pads for my Distress inks. Like I just grab a color that looks similar, but I also have the Distress oxides, and apparently if you mix the two, it will leave a mark on your stamp pad. I didn't notice any difference when I was doing the color blending, but just a heads up on that. So I used Blueprint Sketch about halfway up the card, and then just at the base I'm going to be using some Chipped Sapphire, so it's nice, a nice blue gradient. And then I'm going to, this isn't watercolor paper, this is Nina, so I'm just being kind of very gentle with flicking on some water droplets just to add some interest to the background. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those masks that I had in place. Careful if you have inky fingers, because you don't want to get those fingerprints on your border. I'm going to remove the mask for the heart, and then we're going to move right into the Copic coloring. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, first of all, you've been hearing me talk a lot about how I've been kind of just stuck in a rut. Another one of the things that I like to do is go back and look at my old cards. And that's how I kind of got the idea for this one. It's completely different colors, but the idea is the same. It was an inked background with a large floral stamp that was kind of hanging off the edge. But the colors are also very different. So when I was looking at this, I thought that a blue background would be really pretty with like some pops of yellow-green, and then maybe an orange or a yellow flower. So this image, beautiful, obviously it's drawn with the intention of it looking like a heart. Sometimes these images can be a little bit confusing about what is what. So one of the things that I do is I go on their website and look to see what their design team did. Because if anybody's going to know what the stamp is supposed to be, it's going to be the design team. So that's what I did. I went and looked to see where the leaves were. And the reason I colored them in right out the gate is because I just wanted to map them out, so that I would know what was going to be what and where my breaks were going to be in the flowers. So what breaks those colors would have from each other. So when doing the leaves, basically I'm just really concentrating my shadow in the center. I'm using light flicking motions and just the tip of the marker to put those down. But then I also added in just a couple of little flicks from the edges where, because it's kind of like a more jagged type leaf, and so I wanted to kind of accentuate some of those pieces. Also, in this stamp, there's kind of just like this open area back here. the design team colored it in green, so that's what I opted to do, but I'm sure you could probably do the petal colors and that would also be fine. But when I just kind of have like a nondescript area in the background, this is how I prefer to color it in. I just kind of outline the whole thing all the way out to my darkest color and then move back in towards my lightest color, so that way kind of all the colors are represented. And you can see how dark it looks right now. Just wait until we start adding some color to the leaves around it. It's totally gonna look muddy, like they just blend into each other. So for this little bud on the stem, I didn't want there to be no shading on it, but I did want it to be lifted up from that background. So I'm adding just the dark kind of in the center of the stem and leaving the edges really light so that it pops up from the background. This did not work as well as I had hoped originally, but we're going to go back and fix it later. The other thing is when you have all of these, I wasn't going to show you this part. I actually like paused the camera and was just going to color it like they've seen leaves colored. But this leaf comes out from the flower on the right hand side and then it goes underneath the bud, but it sits on top of like that greenish background. So you got a lot of different areas that you're working with, some that are going to be dark and some that are going to be light. So I thought maybe it would be helpful to show you guys how I kind of tackle that. So as far as the outside edges of the leaves, I'm not even concerned about how light or how dark they are. But the inside edges, the ones that are laying over the buds and the ones that are right next to the other green areas, because these leaves are on top, I want there to be a highlight on the edge. So I'm being super conscientious to make sure that my darker colors do not go out too far. I need that edge to be lighter to break up the leaves. So I'm going to go through and I am going to add all of the colors just like I would before. But I'm really going to concentrate that YG01 on those edges to make sure they stand up. So now you can see we've added all of that color and these background pieces are not really falling into the background. So I'm going to go back in with my darker colors, the YG67 and the YG17, and then just kind of cap it off with the YG03. Now there isn't any YG01 and it helps bring the other leaves up and forward so that it doesn't look just very one layer. For the flowers, I thought it would be kind of cool to have kind of like some pink edges. So I'm putting down my pink first and then I'm going to start working with the yellows. This particular bud, there's just a line kind of drawn down the center of these two petals. So you can pick whichever side you want to be underneath. So which petal do you want to be on top? Whichever one you want to be on top, leave a lighter edge on the side of it. Whatever, if you pick the one on the left, the highlight would be on the right. If you pick the one on the right, the highlight will be on the left. And then add the shadows next to the other one. So here you can see I chose to put the one on the right underneath. So I'm making sure to leave that lighter edge on the left-hand side so it does look like one is under the other. I will tell you, I have a really hard time coloring with lighter colors because I don't get a lot of contrast. And that's what I like. I like brighter colors. I like some contrast. Here I'm just mapping out my pink areas to make sure that I don't carry my yellow up too high. But, so I don't feel like I get a lot of good contrast, especially with the yellows. So it's something that I really kind of challenge myself to work on and work with. So for this one, I'm not really doing any kind of fancy coloring. I am flicking because these petals are so large. I'm pretty much using the side of my marker. I'm not using just the tip because I don't need to. I'm not trying to get any sort of texture with my coloring. I'm not trying to work in small areas. So I can do the flicking with the side of my marker and it's totally fine. It fills the area up faster and then, you know, we can move on to the next color. So for this, I am trying to leave that pink intact, not completely. It's not going to be, and that's totally okay, because in nature, if this flower actually existed, it wouldn't be completely intact there either. One of the challenges with coloring something multiple colors is it's really hard to get that depth because the shadows that would be on the pink part would not be the same color as the shadows on the rest of the flower. This is where if you own gray markers, they can be very, very helpful because then you don't have to worry about that. You can go in and add your shadows with the grays and not even have to be concerned about the colors that you have picked. I tried to be more conscientious with how I was putting down the color and still adding in some of the shadows as I was building the color up, because yellow and pink do make orange. So putting in those shadows with the more orange or darker orange colors wasn't that big of a deal. It still did not give me the contrast that I was looking for. At the end of the day, I think the flower is really pretty. I think that the petals are segregated. I think that you can tell what it was meant to be. It's just a little bit different from what I would normally do, what my personal preference is. And so when you guys ask me about, like, you know, what are your go-to colors, and I do have some, like the set I used for the YGs. That's pretty much what I use whenever I use YGs, unless I'm coloring a Christmas card, and then I go to the YG 99s. But anyway, but a lot of times you just kind of need to play around with it, and what's going to be my preference isn't going to be your preference, and yours is still going to look different from mine because it's going to depend on how much you add. So this flower could be way more orange, like way more orange, if I had added more of that. But because I left so much of the pink on the edges, it isn't as orange as it could be. Or you could add less orange and leave the pink off entirely, and then it would look more yellow. So there isn't a right or a wrong way to do it, or a right or a wrong amount to add. It's just going to depend on the look that you're going for. And here I was just kind of playing around. I really loved the image. Like I said, I saw a bunch of people coloring it on Instagram, and I was like, and I'll be buying that. Plus, Angie and Greg, who are the owners of Concord 9th, are just delightful people, and I love them. So I'm happy to support their company in any way I can. Plus, like, their stamps are awesome. I mean, have you seen what they've made? They're amazing. But anywho, so now I'm just, if you watch my videos before, you know, I work out to my darkest and then back into my lightest, and I'm just blending them out. I'm still being kind of careful to make sure that there is some pink on the edges of each petal. Even the ones that fall in the back that would be more shadowed, I still wanted there to be some pink back there. And the yellows that I used are really, really strong. Because again, I like bright colors. This flower could be way more subdued, just depending on the pinks that, or the yellows and the oranges that you picked. The pink I picked actually is not super bright. Well, kind of. Whatever. So once I get all the way out to the edge, this is my lightest yellow color, I am going to go back in with the pink to do the edges. This is going to A, add another layer of that pink, but B, it's going to help blend the yellow into the pink on the edges. A lot of times with Copics, if you're blending two different colors, you do want to go over them multiple times so that everything does blend together in the fiber of the paper. They need to be pretty saturated, not so saturated that you're bleeding out of your stamp lines, but saturated enough that the colors are going to blend together. So at this juncture, I feel like I do not have enough contrast. So I'm going to bring in an RV09. This is, a lot of times I'll go for a red if I'm doing oranges, but because I already had the pink there, that's why I opted for the RV09. And you're going to see I'm not going to add a ton of this. I'm just going to add a couple of little lines in the areas that I feel like would be the darkest and need just that little extra bump of contrast. Once I have those lines in, I'm going to go back in with the YR04 and just kind of blend them into the rest of the flower. I felt like this helped some, just to give it a little bit more separation. I did go back and add it to the bud as well, and then I colored the other flower. I'm going to go in with my white gel pen because these blooms are so large. They can carry a lot of detail if you want to add it. So I'm just adding a couple of little dots just to kind of break up that coloring, add some interesting detail to the flower, and I'm using my Jelly Roll white gel pen to do that. The other thing that I'm going to do is, to help bump up that dimension, I am going to add a little bit of a shadow with my gray markers. So I'm using a C5 on the area of the flowers that is actually on the blue background. I didn't want the part to be, the part on the white to be that dark. But this is, I typically color, God, you guys are probably so sick of hearing me say this because I probably say the same thing every time. Anyway, high school art class, I color for my light sources in the top right, so all my shadows are in the bottom left. That's my preference. If yours is to the bottom right, that's fine. My recommendation would be to pick one way you like your shadows to fall and master that. Just stick with it, because it doesn't have to go to the left or to the right. Again, not a right or a wrong way to do it. Just pick which one you like and do that. So I blended that out all the way out to a C1. And then I'm going to go back in. I only use the C5 on the green parts. And I'm going to go in with a C3 and just add some shadows to the petals. Again, to the bottom left, as if the light source was in the top right. And this is just going to help kind of break them up even more so that there is more dimension. They look like they're curling up or sitting on top of each other. I prefer to outline all of my images. I like a bold black outline, so I'm using a EK Success writing pen to go ahead and do that. Going to outline the whole thing. I kind of toyed around with the idea of outlining the frame, and then I decided not to. The last thing I'm going to do, as far as card design, not details, I'm just going to stamp my sentiment. This is from that same set. There's a bunch of really awesome sentiments in there. I chose to have mine say "Always in my heart." I'm using black ink from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that down in the Mini Misty. The reason I chose the Mini Misty is because A, I've spent all of this time coloring my one layer card, and I don't want to do it again. And B is because with these bigger stamps, sometimes it's hard to get good coverage the first time. I'm going to go ahead and outline the sentiment with a white gel pen. It isn't necessary because this one was pretty legible, but I wanted to tie in that white border. And then I'm just going to put some clear Wink of Stella on the edges of my flower petals. Then that's the whole card. Pretty typical Kelly card. But I do hope that you guys maybe learned a little something, or it gave you an idea to try something new or be inspired to create, because that's really what I'm here for. That's why I make these YouTube videos. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you are having a wonderful week, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye.